Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. This is a Ukraine War news update for the 11th of October 2023. Let's get straight to where we normally start, which is the Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply. You can find those caveats in the description to this video below. Right, we are seeing a phenomenal number here. Now, we've seen 2 days of relatively quiet numbers, very, very low numbers actually. That could be due to the weather. It could be due to the weekend on Monday, so Sunday's figures coming out on Monday. And it could have been due to OPSEC. And quite often when you see that period, you then see a spike afterwards. Or lots of stuff happened yesterday. Or both. I don't know. Well, I know that lots of stuff did happen yesterday, and in fact, it appears that most of these figures are what is claimed by the general staff, you know, separately, or members of spokespeople for the Ukrainian armed forces. But let's go through them. 820 personnel lost is one of the highest of the whole counteroffensive. We have seen it for, I think, 2 days get above 1,000, but generally it's in the range from 350 to 650. At the most, that sort of range is where we see it. Quite often, more often recently in the 400s mark. So 820 means that something significant has probably happened yesterday. 34 tanks is an insane number of tanks to lose in a single day. The Russians, if that is true, or even if you take 30% off that, they've lost 24 tanks. That is massive, right? 91 armored personnel vehicles, APVs, IFVs, MRAPs, so all the different types of fairly heavy vehicles that aren't tanks. 91 is an obscene number. And again, like, even if that's 50% inflated, that's 45 such vehicles. Truly stupendous. 18 artillery systems, so we have seen fewer than on other days during the last month. We've been up into the 40s. Only, less than a week ago, we had 3 or 4 days, whereas absolutely horrific numbers for the Russians. We've seen that go back down until yesterday. Was it yesterday or the day before? There was basically none. And now we're back up to 18. So it's sort of fairly high numbers, but oddly low compared to what we have seen. 1 multiple launch rocket system, 1 anti-aircraft warfare system, 1 aircraft that's a Su-25 supposedly shot down around Avdiivka, 19 drones, that'll be not from last night, the night before, 20 vehicles and fuel tanks, and 4 pieces of special equipment. Now, there were some huge attacks by the Russians yesterday in the Avdiivka area. Some of the Russians, like Rebar, as a Russian source, was shouting about how wonderful it was and how they've taken here and taken there and done all this amazing stuff. And there was some pretty bad news coming out from even Ukrainian sources earlier on. But as the day went on yesterday, and we went through the night, it appears that actually the Ukrainian communication coming out from the area was way more positive. And in fact, it looks like while the Russians may have taken some strongholds, some points, probably frontline trenches, which is what you would expect. Go and watch Andrew Perpetua's live stream last night. I had a little chat about this. You would expect them to lose kind of frontline trenches as you retreat back to your second line, and then you do your counter-attack and take those frontline trenches again. I mean, that's what they do in the Bakhmut area routinely. That's what they do in a whole number of areas. So yes, Ukraine, given the size of the attacks, will have lost some ground, but at what cost for the Russians? So this is, again, another example of the Russians possibly attriting themselves. Like, they have done more work for the Ukrainians in attacking in Avdiivka than anything else here. So there were a lot of losses, I think, for the Russians there. There were a lot of losses just in the whole, I mean, the spokesperson says the Tavria area. The Tavria area really is kind of this area here. And when they say in the eastern Tavria area, I don't think that can include Avdiivka. So we'll go and look at some of these claims in right now, actually. So General Tarnavisky with an update on the Eastern Tavria front. Almost 100 units of enemy equipment were destroyed, among them a Su-25, a BMP-T Terminator. We've seen a couple of those get hit previously. These are the kind of modern version, upgraded IFV infantry fighting vehicle. They have like some pretty meaty auto cannons on top, or rockets on top of them, and they are, they look pretty vicious. We've seen them strip down some forests in some footage I showed you some months back in the Serebiansky forest, where they were firing these things into the woods and just taking out the trees, but haven't seen them too effective against other vehicles and targets. Anyway, 18 tanks, 59 APCs, 5 artillery systems, and one air defense missile system. So just really significant numbers. In fact, here is a translation of what was claimed. So soldiers of the Tavria Operational Strategic Group destroyed almost 100 units of enemy equipment in a day. That goes back to this, right? Is it OPSEC? Is it like post-weekend spike? No, this is a claim that it happened in a day, including Su-25 and a Terminator. Combat work continues. The Defense Forces of Ukraine continue to conduct an offensive operation in the Melitopol direction. They have improved their tactical position west of Robotina. Not a huge amount of detail coming out of that. During the past 24 hours, the enemy carried out 26 airstrikes, conducting 56 combat engagements, and launched 849 artillery barrages. There was an uptick yesterday in Russian hostilities. Units of rocket forces and artillery from the Tavria OSG during a day carried out 1,775 fire missions. Now, I'd be interested. Of course, this will be like Google Translate or whatever, although this is war translated, so it might be Dmitry himself. But 849 artillery barrages versus 1,777 fire missions. That usually means like just firing 1,777 mortar, self-propelled guns or howitzers or whatever, whereas a barrage might indicate that there's more. It's a whole series of artillery hits. So I don't know that those are comparable numbers. Anyway, total losses of the enemy amounted to 750 people. So just in this area, 750 out of the 820 were lost in the Tavria region. In particular, 18 tanks, 59. It says anti-aircraft missiles. Someone else is saying that's a mistranslation. As we've seen here, 59 APCs. So 59 IFVs and APCs and whatnot. 5 artillery systems, 1 anti-aircraft warfare system, Su-25 unmanned aerial vehicles, 8 of them, 8 drones, 2 cars and 3 units of special equipment, an ammunition depot, and 2 important enemy facilities were also destroyed. So really significant losses there for the Russians. And significantly, that may not include Avdiivka, where we know that there was some pretty huge attacks. Just to give you an idea of what happened in Avdiivka very quickly, it appears there were attacks from the north, Krasnohorivka area, attacks around Vodyane as well. Reporting from Ukraine even claims that the Ukrainians took back some land in this area. I can't talk to the accuracy of that. We saw a vehicle fall off a bridge just by here. If you remember, I showed you that footage yesterday. It was a recovery vehicle that fell off. I don't know why that was at the front of the column, but anyway, this column then went up, and there is various bits of footage of several Russian losses in terms of equipment around this area. But that will be filtering through today. No doubt we'll start seeing more and more footage come through. This is what Andrew Perpetua has for the losses on both sides. He's a mapper that I use. He looks at an awful lot of footage. In fact, he skews to looking at more Russian footage to try and make sure he's catching all the Ukrainian losses. And still, this is what we're seeing. I mean, this is almost certainly as a result of yesterday's attack by the Russians. He's seen a whole host of IFVs, AFVs, and APCs, As you can see there, a lot of BMP-1s, BMP-2s, and BMP-3s, but also MTLB, APCs there, and whatnot. Some civilian trucks too to make up the numbers. A bunch of artillery, and a recovery vehicle. That's the Brem 2 that fell off the bridge. Surveillance and comms equipment as well. So that's a big old list of equipment that the Russians have lost. Ukrainians have lost. Now, he hasn't included Su-25 that is claimed to have been shot down around Avdiivka, in the Avdiivka area. So probably a close air support plane shot down in the supporting role here. There was lots of artillery hammering the industrial areas up here, particularly the coke plant. And this was a kind of precursor to the attacks that we saw over the course of yesterday. I presume today they're going to continue, but they have taken big losses, although they have made some minor territorial gains, I believe. But a plane might have been taken down. On the other hand, and we'll come on to this in a second, a Lancet drone has taken out a Su-25 M1, so that's a close air support plane in Kryvyi Rih, in a kind of a rewatch of what has happened previously. I'll talk about that next. And then a few sort of trucks and whatnot. They're really relatively low value equipment lost by the Ukrainians. This is a bad day for the Russians in terms of equipment loss. I don't think you can deny that, although Russians will try. Rybar was claiming all sorts of success for the Russians in terms of taking different places. Like they claimed that Berdichi had been taken, which would assume Stepovo would be taken. The reality, of course, is somewhat different to what Rybar claims. And slowly, says no reports, this has just come out now, this morning. Slowly, the first images likely to follow with videos of yesterday's Russian attacks on Avdiivka are being published. Here alone are 3 Russian armored vehicles and 2 tanks that have either been abandoned or completely taken out. There's video footage on reporting from Ukraine. Indeed, a number of these vehicles were seen on drone footage dropping off quite a lot of troops. There was a good 50 troops you could see running in one place. Although we didn't see footage of it, the claims were they were just sitting targets for cluster munitions. I don't know if that actually happened, but given the claims of the number of troops lost, it wouldn't surprise me if that did happen. And then moving on here, we have a fire near Moscow, another Russia on fire incident. So I haven't reported on them for a few days, so I thought I'd throw in one of them. Now, in terms of strikes, we've had a couple of quiet days over the last week. We were used to sort of 40 Shahed drones being sent over per night. Don't think there were any sent over last night. We do see another example. So before I show you that or talk about that, just to let you know where that took place. This is Kryvyi Rih, which is let that render over here. So Kryvyi Rih is there. In the last month, we have seen 3 aircraft taken out in Kryvyi Rih and Mykolaiv. Mykolaiv was a MiG taken out at the air base there. Slightly different. These are, as you can see, more sort of rectangular aprons. And then over in Kryvyi Rih, we have these polygonal ones there. Anyway, that's Kryvyi Rih. So that's where we saw last night this strike looks like on the runway there, and this looks like a genuine Su-25 that's taken out. Now, Andrew Perpetua is talking about these 3 planes as a whole. He said at least one of them he reckons was a decoy, not like a wooden decoy. I thought this was quite interesting, and because stuff like this frustrates the heck out of me. It's like, why do you not have one of these sitting over your planes? Like, the plane needn't be out in the open. It's not necessary for it to be out in the open like that. So put one of these over, which are now, there's apparently 30 of these catches on the front line. There's imagery of one around an SPG that I saw this morning. So they are using these. They catch not only Russian Lancets, but also other loitering drones. Currently, there are more than 30 such catchers on the front line. They're easy to move and install. In addition, the design can be adapted to equipment of any size, from a car to a tank, and one presumes from also including an airplane. So here we have a jet that is just sitting out in the open, it taken out by a Lancet drone. It's just such a high value target. What a waste. And it could easily be at least mitigated. It might not 100% succeed, but that's going to be better than nothing. Now, given that there are two other planes, some MiGs that this happened to that I reported on recently, one does wonder, why do they keep doing this? Now, there is a theory. Andrew Perpetua reckons that at least one of those was a decoy, not a wooden one, but one where the plane is now no longer functional in some way. So they leave it out as a kind of sacrificial, bull to the gods of the Lancets. That then gets hit by Lancets. Russians think they've done a wonderful job, but in fact they've hit basically a dud plane. I don't know whether that's a good use of the plane, given that it could be useful for spare parts, so on and so forth. But the idea is that these are non-functional planes, perhaps, and they paint them up to make them look like they are good to go, and that attracts these Lancet strikes. So that might have happened. That might be the case for, say, one of those three that are taken out. But either way, this looks like a genuine one. That annoys me, as I've said. Despite being quiet in terms of long-range missile and drone attacks recently, Ukraine still suffers. Kherson and parts of Dnipropetrovsk Oblast are shelled almost every hour. For example, in Zaporizhia region, there were 127 strikes on 25 settlements. So even though it's quiet on the long-distance strikes and the use of missiles from Russia, but also cruise missiles from Ukraine as well, there are still places that get routinely hammered, particularly Marhanets and Nikopil on the northern shore of the Zaporizhia reservoir, as was. So places around here are just routinely hammered by the Russians. I do wonder about not hearing too much about storm shadows and scalps hitting targets. You do wonder whether there are any left. They've used these quite freely. I don't know freely, but they've used a lot of them. They also don't have many of the planes that can fire them. These Su-24Ms, aren't they? The bombers that fire them. The one theory was they only had 6 left that could actually fly. If any of those have been taken out that we haven't heard about, maybe strikes that footage hasn't come out for. Because they may be further back. They could have been hit by missiles that don't have spotting drones, so you don't know whether in Khmelnytsky, for example, in the Zhytomyr area, Khmelnytsky there, where these jets I think are mainly stored, the ones that fire the Storm Shadow missiles and whatnot, I think fly from there. You'll probably get close air support planes flying from these air bases that would support the front line more. These ones will come out to here and then fire off cruise missiles and then shoot back. But so you won't have spotting drones here, so there won't be video footage coming out like there will be in Mykolaiv and Kryvyi Rih. But you could have a situation where we've seen footage, or we've seen a picture of at least one blown up plane in the Khmelnytsky air base. So it could be that the Ukrainians have run out of airplanes, or don't have enough of them in order to fire these missiles consistently, or they're running low on missiles, or they are firing them, we just don't hear about them. But usually we get social media flagging up when cruise missiles have struck. I mean, it's very rare, I think, that they go unnoticed. So yeah, that is a worry as far as I'm concerned. That's why Taurus will be super important for the Ukrainians to receive. Okay. And moving on to other bits and pieces. So Russia is trying to counterattack, but without success. Meanwhile, so this is Zelensky speaking, and he's talking about Avdiivka here. Counterattack, but without success. Meanwhile, the armed forces of Ukraine are advancing step by step, although not as fast as expected. So this is the acceptance that, it is slow. It's not going as quickly as they hoped. but they are making slow but steady progress. He added that globally time will play into Russia's hand if aid to Ukraine is interrupted. So this is, I suppose, reacting to the distraction that Israel is to the Ukraine conflict in terms of aid, perhaps. He's reacting to the idea that the longer this takes, the more Russia will have a hope of prevailing because of war fatigue, so on and so forth. Now, he's actually popped into Brussels today to meet with NATO and also to have a Ramstein meeting and be there live for that, which is really fascinating. And also why there's quite a lot to go through in the military aid segment in my next video, which is interesting, which is good news because we've had like a week of not an awful lot being announced on that front. Right, I just wanted to pop this up here. Right, so Hroza was the place where there's a grocery and a cafe that was hit by the Russians, and 53 people have died, 5 people still missing. It was supposedly a wake, funeral of someone serving in the military, but everyone who died there, they appear to be civilians. And the Russian propagandists, this is a quote, "At the moment of the strike, there was a funeral of a high-ranking Ukrainian nationalist." No evidence of the rank of that soldier. They call him a nationalist. Of course, many of his accomplices, neo-Nazis, took part in it. So, these are not friends and family. These are accomplices. These are neo-Nazis. And this is according to Nebenzia, Russian representative to in the UN, talking about a terrorist attack on civilians in the Ukrainian village of Hroza. These are the people who died. Do these look like accomplices? Neo-Nazis. These look like people with their lives ahead of them. People with much of their lives behind them and the experience they've had of living and of their families and friends. These are everyday, normal people. It's disgusting the kind of spin that is put on this by Russian propagandists and the propagandists who spread their insidious poison in the UN and elsewhere. So I just thought that it was important, just, try and communicate that there's a lot of ordinary people that died. Right, this is a little bit of a worry. Something I wondered about, actually, and then saw this. A Muslim fighter from the armed forces of Ukraine harshly criticized the Ukrainian authorities for supporting Israel. Now, there's not too much on the Israel conflict for those who worry that I'm, sidetracking too much or whatever. I will talk about, I think, what is important as it pertains to this conflict. And this is one of those things. Now, Ukraine has come out and declared that Hamas are a terrorist organization, but you do have Muslims who might well have sympathies, at least for the Palestinian cause, if not necessarily for Hamas, who then look at what Israel are doing in Gaza Strip and just flattening whole swathes of the Gaza Strip. And to the objective onlooker, you might think, oh, that's close to being pretty horrific. There might be war crimes. I don't know. I'm not saying that. I'm saying I don't know. But you can imagine being a Muslim or anyone who has sympathies for the Palestinian cause, if not the recent methods and events, looking at what Ukraine is doing and siding very strongly with Israel and thinking, hang on, I'm fighting for Ukraine here, and that's not cool. There's an interesting dynamic here. Now, this isn't going to be a widespread problem. There won't be too many of these people, but there are Chechens who are fighting for Ukraine who might feel a little odd about this, a little conflicted about this. Anyway, the Ukrainian government supported Israel by labeling them as that's Hamas, extremists and terrorists. So, yeah, now, if a country supports Russia and says Ukrainians are terrorists, Russia is right, what will happen? Why do you say Palestinians are terrorists? If Palestinians are terrorists, then Ukrainians trying to reclaim their lands are also terrorists. I mean, this is a problem with, I think Clash Report is a Turkish news outlet. And Erdogan, you've had support for Palestinians and possibly support for Hamas on the streets of Ankara. Marches or motorbike marches, motorbike rallies and whatnot, going through the Turkish streets there. So there is support in the wider world for the Palestinian cause and potentially for Hamas, and this causes issues like this. Now, I think Clash has not done a very good job of differentiating between Hamas and Palestinians here. But, and I think Ukraine has said, look, Hamas are a terrorist organization. That's not to say Palestinians are terrorists. Remember the whole subset issue. All cats are animals, but not all animals are cats. So all of Hamas are Palestinians, but not all Palestinians are Hamas. And so you can have an approach to a subset, Hamas, that should not be extrapolated to the whole set, Palestinians, right? Anyway, that I don't know how widespread an issue this might be, but at least there is at least one example of this purportedly, right? Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. Hopefully that's of some interest to you. I will go and get on with the second video for the news pieces today. Toodle pips.